Sri Lanka. But that's a terrible thing.
You know, that was really hard to hear. I think it was at the Easter egg roll, but in there he does say that we're working with the government of Sri Lanka. Government officials say that NTJ, that little-known group, is now known for things like, which, you know, not as deadly, they deface Buddhist statues. Buddhists make up about 70% of the population. They don't think they did this alone. They're afraid an international terror group is behind all this. How is this connected to a wider spread that we've been talking about here on our show of radical ideology? I broke it down with Brad Bowman today from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Brad, we understand that the authorities in Sri Lanka apparently had threats on their radar and didn't either act on them or inform certain people about them. Can you imagine a scenario in which it would be appropriate to sit on those?
I cannot. I mean, I can see that it could happen, and the explanations here are not necessarily nefarious. It's still very early, and there's more to come out. But, you know, only you have to look at the United States and before the 9/11 terrorist attacks. There were elements of the U.S. government that knew things. And, you know, one of the great findings after the fact is that the right hand was not talking to the left. And so if that can happen in the United States, it certainly can happen in a place like Sri Lanka. So to me, the fact that some elements of the government there had information that wasn't necessarily shared with others is not necessarily nefarious. I suspect that they will do a thorough investigation and ask themselves what went wrong and why the information didn't get where it needed to go.
As we see the spread of radical ideology, not just in what we traditionally think of as the Middle East, but into other parts of Africa and into Asia, where does this fit?
I think this very clearly could be an example where you have ISIS basically saying, hey, you're declaring the end of our caliphate, but we're still here. You know, they have an organizational interest to say to their followers, to their potential followers, that we are still relevant and that we can still carry out operations such as this. So, again, I don't know that that's the case, but it would not surprise me if there was some sort of ISIS or Al-Qaeda affiliation there. We're very quickly on the heels of the declaration of the end of the caliphate. They're saying that we can carry an operation like this as a message both to their current followers and to prospective followers.
Brad, when you hear that 7 suicide bombers were involved and everything was so well timed, that someone made those vests, which are not easy to make, yes, that they were somehow funded, and we don't know how they were funded, does that suggest to you that there is a larger orchestrated entity here than just 7 ragtags who got together and decided they wanted to do this on Easter Sunday?
Yeah, again, it's early, and I don't know for sure, but the short answer to your question is yes, it does. I mean, you know, I've heard people talking in the last day or so who know Sri Lanka very well, and a lot of experts have not even heard of this group. I mean, up till now, this was a group that was relatively unknown, and so the idea that they could pull this off by themselves is a little bit hard for me to believe. So. Not knowing for sure, my going-in assumption is that there was international assistance that was provided to this group in some form, but remains to be seen.
All of the old ideas, paradigms, groups that many of us are operating on right now, when we think of, you know, what's a threat on the foreign field, maybe that's changing in ways that we aren't always aware of.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's important that, and just a personal view, that we view incidents like this, whether it's against our religion or our faith system or someone else's, I think we really need to view it as an attack on all of us, whether it's, you know, it's a mosque of people praying in New Zealand or a church in Sri Lanka or whatever it is, that religious intolerance in all of its forms should be considered a threat to all of us. And if we do that, we're going to be able to assemble a much more effective response.
These ideologies spreading, these groups popping up, as he says, not to be alarmist, but it is a threat to everybody. Both the FBI and the UK's Interpol, they're joining the investigation into these attacks. But what did the Sri Lankan government already know? This is video of the very first explosion, St. Anthony Shrine at Colombo. And within just a